glad you brought up like leaders and examples, because this is a thing that came up.
It did.
In your question about easing the transition. And Danny related it to his own experiences. Like, it's a little different. He was coming from French Canada, not another continent or whatever. But like, he was 19 coming to the U.S., didn't speak any English. And it was funny. He was like, eventually you start to get the jokes. And like, that's when you really become part of the crew. Like when you're sitting around just bullshitting. Yeah. Like, and they talked about the tutor and everything, but he talked about the leaders in the locker room. And that is, while a lot of us may not agree with every minor roster decision they've made, because ultimately, like the Garnet Hathaway thing, all these guys that were like, does this really make sense? It's not going to matter in a few years. They probably won't be here. They're all in their 30s or late 20s. But now that he's here and here early at this age, does it make more sense to you? Like, I don't want to just totally like, oh, Danny was right the whole time and all these guys, it's actually smart to have them. I don't know if that's true, but it makes more sense to me now that they know he's here and they're going to have the culture.
I think, look, whether you agree with it or not, I think Briere made it abundantly clear today that the emphasis, one might even call it obsession, with culture that they seem to have is in no small part driven by the fact that they want Michkov to work. That, like, yes, they want to have a strong culture because they think it's important, because they're hockey men who play the game and believe that having that tight locker room is really, really important. But you can't tell me that they didn't have in the back of their heads, we need the culture to be strong for Michkov, because we know that there are some concerns about his competitiveness, that he rubs some teammates the wrong way. And also, he has the talent in theory to be a superstar. So we want him coming into a room that we feel like can foster him and foster his talent best. And I do think that, and again, you can disagree with that prioritization.
Certainly.
You certainly can. But I don't think the emphasis on culture can be removed from the arrival of Michkov. I think that the culture building, the emphasis on that is very much linked to trying to get the most out of Michkov. Like, it's an if A, then B kind of thing.
And I know, like, it's not the only reason. Like, he's Sean Couturier, longest tenured guy, been here a while, well respected. I mean, the whole locker room was pissed when he got scratched, maybe more so than he was, like. But when you were just mentioning the Jets, and it's like, yeah, man, that team, they don't give a fuck about defense. They had a great year because their goalie put up a .930. Yeah. And if he doesn't, they will not make the playoffs, And I just look at Sean Couturier as, maybe his offensive game never comes back, but he at least knows what to do. Like, he will always be good in the neutral zone. Yeah. Like, he knows where to stand and where to put his stick. And if you're going to look for an example of just like, okay, this is what we're asking from you, Sean Couturier is that example. Like, if he sets that defensive standard, that's got to be a good thing. Like, that can only help Michkov and all the young players. Like, I feel like the decision to name Couturier captain, even that makes more sense now. Is that a stretch?
I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's part of it, that the idea of like setting a good example, like Couturier sets a defensive example in a way that Scott Laughton doesn't.
Like, why? Like, because that was the question. Why isn't it Laughton? Yeah. We're told the only reason he's here is like captain intangible shit. Yeah. So why not just slap the C on him? Well, other than his contract, like, he might not be here for 8 years, like Sean Couturier is going to have to be. But like, I don't know. It just, that seems to, and it could be a stretch. I might just be looking for reasons to be happy today because it's a really fun fucking day. But it just makes more sense to me today. That's all.
Look, I do think that all of their moves, all of their decisions have been colored by the knowledge that Michkov is coming. Like, we talked about it, I think, I mentioned in my article yesterday that in November of last year, John Tortorella more or less said, we changed our playing style to be more rush-focused in anticipation of Matvei Michkov. And that was before they knew he was coming this year.
The Mad Russian. That was actually something, because we're never going to know the full answer because there's so many things they can and can't say. Danny said, like, when this process started, he's like, well, at the end of their season, we started hearing rumblings that it might be possible he could come over early. Does John Tortorella say in a press conference? Now, again, he said the Mad Russian because he forgot Matvei's name. Get your Mad Russian gear at phlylocker.com. Does he say that, though, if there's not some inkling? Like, does he change the way this team plays? Now, part of it is like, yo, we can't score. We need to figure out a way to score. Yeah. And they did at least until they traded Sean Walker. But, like, I get that that's part of it. But do you change the whole way you play the game if you don't have an inkling that he might be coming sooner than 3 years from now? Look,
all I can say is that everything I heard during the season was that they did not expect him to be here next year. And the plan, the timeline, it doesn't really line up with him coming this year. Like, there's a reason why they made the trades they did and they took on dead money for the next couple years and they'd be willing to buy guys out and retain salary and things like that, because it's always been with an eye on 2026. And 2026, that summer, would have been the summer had Michkov played out his contract in the KHL. That would have been the summer he comes over. So I think, like, there's nothing that I heard that leads me to believe that back in October they knew he was coming over. But I guess it's theoretically possible that, I mean, look, Michkov straight up said today they were talking to me all year. Like, they were talking to him regularly. And I'm sure Michkov was telling them, like, yeah, if I have any way of getting out of that contract, I'd love to come over next year. I want to come over here as soon as possible. And with that knowledge, they're like, well, you know, we're not saying it's definitely going to happen, but we should prepare for the possibility, because clearly this kid who we're talking to a lot more than we were admitting we were talking to is going to do everything he can to get over here as quickly as possible.
We all silly like the mayor.